part of the problem, a big part of the problem was he didn't have what New York got.
A contributor to the issue, a major contributor to the issue, was he didn't have what new got like I resembled. Wow, like wow man, he was truly partaking in his life. And he moved detracted from him. He before his unfavorable takeoff DMX left us. With more than famous tracks he left an admonition in the present scoop. We're returning to DMX's chilling hunches. About Diddy was it industry hamburger? Or something more profound, with 2Pac's shadow approaching, and rest charges, blending the pot, profound's words, currently reverberation, with an eerie truth lock-in, as we dig into the core of Hip Jump's most puzzling competition. Void that he left open when he passed on Okai. I don't feel that void yet. I truly do feel glad for that kid. In light of the fact that digging into the cryptic universe of DMX, it's essential to comprehend the embodiment of the man behind the legend Lord Simmons, referred to the world as DMX, was a guide of freedom, a quality well established in his difficult childhood in Yonkers, New York, brought into the world to a youthful couple, and brought up in the cruel real factors of neediness, and disregard DMX's initial life, was a story of versatility, his dad's non-attendance, and a tempestuous home life. Did barely anything to hose his soul. Rather, DMX found comfort in the roads, looking for fraternity among his friends, and framing a rugged security. With man's closest companion, K9's this security was personal, as well as so profoundly emblematic, as reflected in his later works. And his famous woofing off the cuff, there was a craving from the road that should be filled. You understand what I'm talking about. I'm the demeanor of the road. I'm the mouth of the road, you realize. I'm his excursion in the music business, started at the youthful age of 14 beatboxing for Prepared Ron. Yet it wasn't simply a fast ascent to distinction. DMX hustled, hard-selling mixtapes on traffic intersections, a demonstration of his independence, and assurance his most memorable significant break came in 1992 with Columbia Records. Yet it was his 1997 marking with Unpleasant Riders to Jam Records that launched him into the spotlight. Two different tunes. That very evening I composed Audi, and Let Me Fly that very evening with his Dut collection. It's Dim and Damnation is blistering in 1998. DMX exhibited his crude ability as well as his capacity to interface with the majority through his abrasive valid portrayal of road life. Anyway, DMX's process was not without its battles. His childhood set apart by time in kids' homes and endurance in the city through unlawful exercises, molded his point of view in masterfulness. He found a lined up between his life and that of lost canines neglected and battling for endurance. His association with the minimized and ignored parts of society was a repetitive topic in his workmaker Woman Gree, who worked intimately with DMX, distinctively portrayed him as a combat each figure rapper in New York. And when this wild intensity, combined with his one-of-a-kind way of consolidating forceful yapping sounds in rap fights, made DMX a considerable and regarded figure in the New York rap scene. Gree's experiences illustrate a man whose crude and proud way to deal with music was a much-needed refresher in an industry progressively inclining towards additional cleaned pop, accommodating sounds. And I feel like I had something to demonstrate to you. 'Cause by then, as the main craftsmen in history, have their initial two collections appeared #1, and I have two Planet B in 1 year. So I'm similar to DX's effect on hip jump culture. Was fantastic. He wasn't a rapper. He was a narrator who could wind around unpredictable stories, according to numerous viewpoints as found in tracks like Damien, and the convo of his capacity to participate in an expressive discussion with his evil presences, and even God himself. Put him aside from his contemporary Aries. His impact reached out past the music, contacting lives with his genuineness and refusal to be everything except himself in spite of his gigantic ability and achievement. DMX's life and vocation were many times eclipsed by his own battles, The media regularly centered around his debates and fights with substance misuse, eclipsing his melodic virtuoso and effect on hip bounce culture anyway. As Wa, the fellow benefactor of harsh riders' amusement, brought up DMX's inheritance, it's obvious he was a voice for the voiceless, addressing those on the edges of society. His refusal to adjust to industry principles or sell out his convictions simply added to his legend. As we further dig into DMX's terrible and troublesome end, plainly his passing was not only a misfortune for the universe of hip-hop, yet a complicated embroidery of occasions and doubts that left the local area catching for answers authoritatively. According to the Westchester Province Clinical Analyst's Office, DMX kicked the bucket from a substance-prompted coronary episode, prompting an absence of blood flow to his cerebrum. The unmistakable expressions of the clinical inspector resound with grave lucidity. It was heart failure for a while, so there was no course to the mind intensified by the finding that intense substance inebriation had caused this horrendous chain of occasions. The evening of April 2, 2021, denoted the start of the end for the unbelievable rapper paramedics dispatched Ed. In no less than a moment of the crisis call wound up in a test of skill and endurance, endeavoring to resuscitate DMX and Charlene and Joe. This is the news that fans had been fearing the entire week, as DMX, who had been in a coma, has authoritatively kicked the bucket. The assertion put out, notwithstanding their endeavors. The harm was irreversible, as the clinical source piercingly put it. His demise, in a real sense, happened quickly on the grounds that the mind was dead. This lamentable end was reached in spite of DMX being on ventral military help for quite a long time. He never rose up out of his unconsciousness. This nerve-wracking situation started a flood of pain and backing, not just from fans and the hip jump local area, yet additionally from DMX's family. Their assertion following his demise said a lot of the man and the fighter soul he had. Duke was a champion who battled till the end. He adored his family with his entire existence, and we esteem the times we enjoyed with him. Baron's music propelled innumerable fans across the world, and his famous inheritance will reside on perpetually in the midst of this misfortune. Reports world connecting any semblance of Jay-Z and Diddy to his demise anyway. These claims were met with harsh reprimand from DMX's lawyer, Murray Richmond, who excused any association with the immunization or other fear-inspired notions. Richmond's words resound with clearness against the scenery of talk and hypothesis. People who offered that expression had no premise to form a conviction anyway. It ought to be noticed that the hypothesis about the association between his demise and Diddy didn't emerge all of a sudden. The perplexing trap of connections and clashes that DMX explored in his vocation is, however complex as it could be captivating, one especially entrancing perspective is his communication with Diddy, otherwise called Puff Daddy. DMX's vocation direction was fundamentally formed by this relationship, which was set apart by a mix of regard, contention, and at last well-established analysis. The DMX's underlying experience with Diddy was a vital crossroads. In a sincere meeting with drink winners, DMX reviewed how Diddy, after at first excusing him as unmarketable because of his unpleasant voice, made a total circle back. And one thing I regard about Puff, one thing I regard about him ingenuine, is that essentially he confronted me directly what he felt when fresh insight about DMX's looming managed a jam arrive at Diddy. He quickly proposed to twofold what Def Jam had proposed anyway. DMX, consistent with his autonomous soul, declined. Did he's proposition this cooperation was significant of DMX's respectability and his obligation to his creative vision, na home slice since. In such a case that you didn't see the monster that I was then, he commented, mirroring his faithfulness and self-conviction. DMX is one of them. You comprehend what I'm talking about. So on the off chance that he was unable to deal with you, he didn't need you on the name, regardless of the rough beginning. DMX and Diddy accomplished ultimately cooperate with DMX, highlighting on follows awful kid craftsmen like Mace. And the Loxiat, this expert joint effort, didn't convert into a smooth relationship. DMX was vocal about his view of Diddy, especially with regards to the music business, more extensive elements. He saw Diddy as a figure who focused on benefit over workmanship, a position that conflicted with DMX's own way of thinking. DMX, who generally saw himself as a voice of the roads, had confidence in the holiness of workmanship and its influence to address the underestimated this distinction in viewpoint law. DMX to see Diddy's methodology as a contributing variable to the grievous passings of 2Pac and Big Deal. In DMX's eyes, figures like Diddy and Sue Knight addressed an industry more worried about profit than with the prosperity and creative trustworthiness of its craftsmen. Such perspectives just added layers to the current pressures among DMX and Diddy, was insane. I never saw a Biggie grin, thus have that. And Max's relationship with 2Pac Shaker was particularly unique. While profoundly regarding 2Pac and recognizing the void his demise made, DMX generally kept up with his remarkable character, like gracious you like the following.